season 4 of the We Talk series. Another new day, another new leader, and most importantly, another new conversation. That's what makes the series so exciting. The We Talk brings to you the most prominent voices of the HR industry who are donning the change makers hat at their respective organization as they share with us their precious experiences and insights on and around the HR ecosystem. So joining us today is Sapan Agarwal, General Manager Human Resources, Crompton Reeves Consumer Electricals Limited. A brief introduction about Sapan before we kickstart our conversation. An HR expert with 12 years of progressive leadership experience in the domain of talent and organization transformation. Sapan's passion lies at the intersection of HR, data, and technology. What excites him as an HR professional is the opportunity to spot and unleash potential for benefit of the individuals as well as for the organization. In his personal time, he loves to mentor fresh talent on campus for creating a robust talent pipeline for organizations of the future. With that, a very warm welcome, Sapan. It is indeed a delight to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Vaishaki, for that wonderful introduction.
Looking forward to an engaging discussion with you. So, Sapan, to set in the context as well as to start off today's discussion, my question for you would be, how is your industry tackling the changes that the workplace has gone over the past couple of years? So, if you could share the, a brief overview and start our conversation.
I think that's an interesting question. So, if you see post-COVID, most of the organizations have undergone change in their ways of working. COVID had a profound impact on changing the way the organizations work. For example, if I talk about our industry, let's say consumer durable industry, I don't think remote working or hybrid working was ever seen in this industry. And now it has become kind of a norm. What this entails is that organizations have to, change the mindset of their leaders, also reskill their managers on how to manage virtual teams. Most of them are managing virtual teams for the first time. What it also entails is that organizations have to make detailed communication plan for intensifying communication further, because otherwise the remote workforce can get easily disengaged, right? This is one of the changes that I have seen as a result of COVID in last few years. Another change that I'm seeing right now is that there is increasing level of stress in the organization. And this is true not just for us. Even when I talk to my peers across the industry, I realize that stress levels in general has gone up. Now, this has resulted in is increased focus on employee well-being. If you see, every organization is taking active efforts in promoting physical well-being, mental well-being, as well as promoting work-life balance. Third change I would say that I'm seeing right now is that almost all the good organizations, they have realized the importance of having diversity in place. So every good organization you'll see will have diversity agenda in place. The way we look at it is not only it is important to hire diversity, but you also have to take active steps to make them feel included in the workforce. And that requires sensitization of your managers. Our message to the diversity candidates should not be that we have hired you despite you being different. Rather, our message has to be that we have hired you because you are different. And that's where the shift is required, because that's where we leverage the value. So I think these are a couple of changes which would be at the top of my mind when I talk about recent changes in the organization.
You perfectly laid out a couple of interesting points. Sapan, as you mentioned that the industry that you represent, hybrid work culture, remote work culture was something no one could have imagined, but it's happening, right? So speaking about that, you spoke about diversity and inclusion, and most importantly, you also touched upon the point of mental well-being. So when we combine all this together, holistically, what comes to our mind is employer branding, because if an organization is going through such changes, how those informations are going out to the candidates, to the outside world. So coming in terms, can you shed some light on your employer branding strategy and how it has evolved over the past few years?
So if I look at how Crompton's employer branding strategy has evolved over past few years, if I talk about few changes, First thing that comes to my mind is that work-life balance of flexible working policies have become a critical consideration for the employee. If I talk about my past, when I would approach candidates, it was good to have. But right now, it's must to have, especially if we approach female candidates. The question is not whether you have flexible working policy in place. The questions are for how many days employees get to work from home in a week. So this is something which has to be carefully thought of and embedded in the employer branding practices of the organization. Similarly, if I talk about Generation Z, even though they are very ambitious, but if you see, they are very, very particular about the quality of life, the work-life balance, the flexibility that they get. Another important change, or let's say driver of employer branding for us, is the kind of culture which you are able to have in the organization. These days, before any employee joins you, he'll go through your career websites to see what kind of culture feel that he gets from your career websites. He'll go through your LinkedIn page to see what's there. He'll also go through your Glassdoor reviews. At Crompton, we actively monitor all this so that we take right steps to improve the organization culture. For example, if you see, we have hugely invested in our managerial capability through our Great Manager program, so that we can strengthen the connect between the manager and employee, which I believe is a very, very important driver of employer branding for us. So these are a couple of changes which I would say have happened in our employer branding strategy over last few years.
Perfect, Sapan. So you have touched upon another very important point, talking about the new generation. So I'm kind of inquisitive to know more, that being in the talent space. So what's your take on the new generation entering the workforce? And most importantly, how do you see their expectations being different from those of that of the previous generation? If you can share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so if you see new generation, especially if I talk about, let's say, Gen Z, they are much more ambitious in nature. Okay, what this means is that they look for purposeful roles, whether they get to create impact in the kind of roles that they are handling. They also want faster career progression. So as the organization, if you want to manage Gen Z well, you have to carefully craft meaningful roles for them. And at the same time, there has to be progressive career discussions with them every 2 to 3 years so that they remain engaged. I would also say that one thing I love about this generation is that they are super confident. They are vocal, they are expressive. They don't want to be told as much as they want to be consulted. What this means is that we have to sensitize against our managers and leaders that your authoritarian style, so to say, will not work with these people, because they like to be consulted and not to be told as much. Another important aspect of Gen Z is that, as I was touching earlier upon also, that while they are ambitious, while they are confident, they also value the quality of life. So they are much more conscious about what kind of work-life balance you have in place, what kind of flexibility that the organization is able to provide in the working hours. Okay, so any organization, while they are hiring Gen Z, they have to carefully think through all these aspects before taking that decision, right? Another thing that I've realized is that because this is a generation which has virtually grown in the internet, in the space of in the era of internet, with online gaming, with social media, there is always this instant gratification which is available. The repercussion that it has for the organization is that they look for constant feedback, instant feedback. So they are not the generation who will wait for the feedback to come their way for 3 months to 6 months, or that they have done a role or a job and they would like to have instant feedback. So these are a couple of things about Gen Z which I can think of right now.
Thank you for sharing those insights with us. So Sapan, this kind of leads to my next question. You mentioned about this hybrid work culture. So a very core element when it comes to, be it hybrid or be it on premise, employee engagement strategies, because that's an essence of how an organization, how a business runs at the end of the day. So how are your employee engagement strategies, especially when we talk about this remote and hybrid work setup? How is that working?
Yeah. So managing hybrid workforce or remote workforce, as I was mentioning earlier, the organization really need to focus on their communication strategies. There had to be very thoughtfully planned communication initiatives so that you reach out to that workforce more frequently, more clearly, more precisely. This is one of the very important requirements for managing remote workforce or engaging remote workforce. Another important step that we have taken is how do you listen to the employees? So let's say we have onboarded a listening tool, which is a chat bot here, so that the employees are able to raise their concerns on that platform. And then there are dedicated teams which are monitoring those responses to ensure that those employees get timely feedback. Another thing, if I talk particularly, about Gen Z, is that we really need to simplify the processes and declutter the work, make the job easier to do and fun to do, so that the work content has to be meaningful and at the same time enjoyable for them. And last but not least, we are putting huge efforts in training our managers on how do you actively engage, because at the end of the day, that's the most critical relationship for any employee, that whether he feels engaged with the work given by his manager, with the kind of feedback sessions or review sessions that he's having with his manager. So how do our managers communicate frequently and keep the teams engaged? That's another important pillar of engaging remote workforce here at Crompton.
Amazing to hear how Crompton as an organization is taking their necessary measures to, bulk up their employment strategies. So this leads to my last question, and this is one of my favorite question. So 12, more than 12 years in this talent acquisition space. So I'm sure you must be having, a lot of challenges in your bucket and a lot of stories to share. So can you share some of the most prominent challenges that you have faced in the talent acquisition space over the years? And most importantly, what were your strategies on the go to overcome them?
Yeah, so if I talk about challenges in the space of talent acquisition, one challenge is obviously how do you attract the relevant talent pool? And for that, your employer branding strategy has to be really, really robust. Attracting the right talent pool is most important. You have to constantly work on your employer branding strategy. It has to evolve so that it stays relevant with time, right? For example, right now, if you see, we are trying to communicate what is the purpose of our organization. Right? Another important area where we focus is, let's say, how do you improve the quality of assessment? So quality of assessment is important from two lenses. One, from the organization lens, that we are able to hire the relevant candidate. Also, from the perspective of employee, that he is joining the right organization. So there is huge effort which goes into training our hiring managers on how do you assess the candidate, both for his current role as well as future role and the organizational fit. There is nothing more painful than seeing the employee joining you and then leaving you in within a couple of months. We also deploy a lot of database psychometric assessments here, especially when it comes to our middle level and senior level positions, so as to ensure that our quality of assessment is very robust. And third, I would say is a perennial challenge which any TA professional will face, is how do you contain the costs? And another important thing is how do you meet your diversity targets, right? This is an area where I would say we are still evolving, but there is huge pushback that we face at times. But yeah, it's important and it still remains one of the challenges that we are struggling with.
Lovely to hear.
Yeah.
And I believe there's always, as everyone says, is room for improvement. I won't say improvement exactly, but there are certain avenues we as organizations we are yet to venture out, yet to do a lot more over there. So I completely wish that, as Crompton as an organization, you can ramp up those areas where you feel like, you can do much more. So definitely we'll look forward to that. And with that, this kind of wraps up our conversation for the day. Thank you so much, Sapan, for sharing your fantastic knowledge with us. It was lovely conversing with you today. And once again, for our audiences, thank you for joining us today. We'll be back again, yet another exciting conversation next week. Till then, keep talking, everyone.